The summer of 1959 was unforgiving. It was a wet, heavy heat that clung to the skin and turned the asphalt of 125th Street into a sticky black river. The air smelled of exhaust, fried fish, and simmering tension. Harlem was bustling, as it always was, a city within a city that moved to its own rhythm, a syncopated beat of jazz drifting from open windows and the roar of the elevated train rattling overhead. But beneath the music and the commerce, there was a jagged edge to the atmosphere. The police presence had increased in recent weeks, blue uniforms patrolling in pairs, their eyes scanning the sidewalks, not for crime, but for dominance. Elise Johnson, the daughter of the most feared man in Harlem, walked through this landscape with a grace that set her apart. She was 20 years old, a student, poised and educated, insulated from the grittiest realities of her father's business by a wall of money and reputation. She wore a tailored wool coat, perhaps too warm for the season, but fashionable, her hair perfectly coiffed, carrying a bag of books and a small parcel from the bakery. To the people of Harlem, she was royalty. Men stepped aside and tipped their hats as she passed. Shopkeepers waved from their doorways. She was Bumpy Johnson's heart, the one thing in the world that remained pure and untouched by the blood that paved the streets. But to Officer Sean the Bull McInness, sitting in his patrol car at the corner of Lenox Avenue, she was just another target. McInness was new to the 28th Precinct. He was a transfer from Hell's Kitchen, a man with a reputation for brutality that had become a liability even for the Irish mobs downtown. He was a massive slab of a man, with forearms like cured hams, and a face that was perpetually flushed red, either from whiskey or rage. He didn't know the unwritten rules of Harlem yet. He didn't know that there were lines you didn't cross, people you didn't touch. He only saw a young black woman walking with her head held high, looking, in his opinion, far too confident. "Look at that," McInness grunted to his partner, a younger, nervous rookie named Hopkins, walking like she owns the damn sidewalk. "Leave it be, Sean," Hopkins muttered, gripping the steering wheel. "That's a nice girl. She ain't bothering nobody." "She's bothering me," McInness said. He opened the car door and stepped out. The suspension of the cruiser groaned as his weight shifted. He adjusted his belt, letting his hand rest casually on his nightstick, and strode across the street. He didn't walk with purpose. He walked with entitlement, forcing pedestrians to scatter out of his path. Elise didn't notice him at first. She was thinking about her exams, humming a melody she'd heard on the radio. She stepped off the curb to cross the street, waiting for a break in the traffic. "Hey!" The voice was like a bark. Elise turned, startled. She saw the towering figure of the officer looming over her. The sun reflected off his badge, blinding her for a moment. "You talking to me, officer?" she asked, her voice polite. "Educated," McInness sneered. The polish in her voice irritated him. It didn't sound submissive enough. "Yeah, I'm talking to you. You jaywalking?" "I haven't crossed yet," Elise said, confused. "I'm waiting for the light." "Don't get smart with me." McInness stepped closer, invading her personal space. The smell of stale tobacco and sweat rolled off him. "I saw you step off the curb. That's intent. That's disturbing the flow of traffic." It was nonsense, and they both knew it. Around them, the street traffic slowed. People on the sidewalk stopped. They watched with a collective holding of breath. They saw a white cop cornering a young black woman. It was a scene they had witnessed 1,000 times, and it usually ended in tears or handcuffs. "I'm sorry if I misunderstood," Elise said, clutching her books tighter to her chest. "I'll step back." She tried to move backward, onto the safety of the sidewalk. McInness reached out and grabbed her arm. It wasn't a gentle detainment. His fingers, thick as sausages, clamped down on her bicep with crushing force. He yanked her forward, pulling her off balance. Her books tumbled to the ground, scattering across the dirty pavement. The bakery box fell, crushed under his boot as he stepped forward. "I didn't say you could leave," McInness shouted, a cruel smile spreading across his face. He was enjoying this. He loved the fear that flashed in her eyes. "You're hurting me," Elise cried out. She tried to pull her arm away, but his grip was iron. "Let go! You have no right!" "I have every right!" McInness laughed. It was a loud, braying sound that echoed off the brick buildings. He shook her, physically manhandling her like a rag doll. "I'm the law here. You move when I say move. You speak when I say speak." The crowd on the sidewalk grew larger. A man in a flat cap stepped forward, his fists clenched. But he stopped. He looked at the gun on McInness's hip. He looked at the rookie cop by the car, who had his hand on his holster. The bystander effect took hold, a mixture of outrage and paralyzing fear. To intervene was to die. "Please," Elise gasped, tears of pain welling in her eyes. "My father." "I don't care who your daddy is," McInness spat, leaning in close to her face. "Unless he's the mayor, he can't help you now." He tightened his grip, twisting her arm behind her back, forcing her to bend forward in a position of submission. Elise screamed. It was a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the noise of the traffic. "Stop struggling," McInness roared, playing to the crowd now. "Stop resisting." He wasn't arresting her. He was humiliating her. He was marking his territory. He held her there for another 30 seconds, savoring the power, letting her sob in pain and embarrassment in the middle of 125th Street. Then, just as abruptly as he had grabbed her, he shoved her away. Elise stumbled, falling to her knees on the concrete. She scraped her palms, the grit biting into her skin. She looked up, trembling, terrified. McInness stood over her, adjusting his cap. "Get your trash off the street," he said, kicking one of her books toward the gutter. "And next time I see you, you better walk in the gutter where you belong." He turned and walked back to his cruiser, laughing. He slapped the roof of the car as he got in. "Did you see that, Hopkins? That's how you handle them. You gotta show them who's boss early." The cruiser pulled away, merging into traffic. On the sidewalk, the spell broke. 2 women rushed forward to help Elise up. The man in the flat cap gathered her books, dusting them off with his sleeve. "Are you hurt, miss?" one of the women asked, her voice hushed. Elise didn't answer. She couldn't speak. She was shaking so violently, her teeth chattered. The physical pain in her arm was throbbing, a deep bruise already forming where his fingers had dug in. But the internal wound was deeper. She had been raised as a princess of Harlem, protected by the most dangerous reputation in the city. And in the span of 3 minutes, a stranger had stripped that protection away and treated her like an animal. She took her books. She didn't look at anyone. She turned and began to walk home, her pace quickening until she was almost running. She needed to get to Lenox Terrace. She needed safety. She needed her father. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson sat in his favorite armchair in the living room of his apartment at Lenox Terrace. The apartment was cool, the heavy curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. He was reading a newspaper, a cup of coffee resting on the side table. He was a man of contrasts, a violent kingpin who quoted Shakespeare, a ruthless enforcer who played chess with grandmaster skill. In this room, he was just a father waiting for his daughter to come home. He heard the key turn in the lock. The door opened and closed. "Elise?" he called out, not looking up from the paper. "You're back early. Did you get the—" He stopped. He heard a sob. It was a stifled, choked sound. The sound of someone trying desperately not to cry and failing. Bumpy lowered the paper slowly. He stood up. Elise was standing in the foyer. She looked shattered. Her coat was dirty at the knees. Her hair was disheveled. She was clutching her arm to her chest, and her face was streaked with tears. The transformation in Bumpy Johnson was instantaneous. The calm, intellectual businessman vanished. In his place stood something ancient and terrifying. His eyes, usually warm when he looked at his daughter, went flat and dead, like the eyes of a shark sensing blood in the water. He crossed the room in 3 strides. He didn't speak. He gently took her good arm and led her to the sofa. He sat her down. He went to the sideboard, poured a glass of water, and placed it in her hands. "Breathe," he said softly. Elise took a sip. Her hands shaking so much the water spilled onto her dress. "Who?" Bumpy asked. Just one word. It hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "A cop," Elise whispered. "On 125th, near the bakery." Bumpy didn't move. He didn't shout. He sat down on the coffee table opposite her, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. "Tell me everything. Leave nothing out," Elise told him. She told him about the cruiser, the accusation of jaywalking, the insults. She told him how he had grabbed her, how he had twisted her arm, how he had laughed while the crowd watched. She told him about the book he had kicked into the gutter. As she spoke, Bumpy listened with a terrifying intensity. He catalogued every detail, the physical description of the man, the number of the cruiser, the time of day. When she finished, she rolled up the sleeve of her coat. Bumpy looked at her arm. 5 distinct finger marks were already turning a dark, ugly purple against her skin. The bruise was deep. It was the mark of a man using excessive, sadistic force. Bumpy stared at the bruise for a long time. He reached out and touched it, his touch feather-light. "He touched you," Bumpy said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact that he was struggling to process. A police officer had put his hands on Bumpy Johnson's child. "He said," Elise sniffed, wiping her eyes. "He said he didn't care who my father was. He said unless you were the mayor, you couldn't help me." Bumpy stood up. He walked to the window and pulled back the curtain slightly, looking out over the city that he ruled. "He was right," Bumpy said quietly. "The mayor couldn't help you." He let the curtain fall back into place. He turned to Elise. "Go wash your face, sweetheart. Put some ice on that arm. Then I want you to rest." "Daddy, what are you going to do?" Elise asked, fear creeping into her voice. She knew that look. She knew what that stillness meant. "I'm going to handle it," Bumpy said. "I'm going to make sure he never touches anyone again." He waited until she went into her bedroom and closed the door. Then Bumpy walked to the telephone. He dialed a number. "Send Nat and Whispers to the apartment," he said. "Now." 10 minutes later, Nat Pettigrew and Whispers were standing in the living room. They were Bumpy's most trusted lieutenants, men who had walked through fire with him. They saw the look on Bumpy's face and knew this wasn't business. This was personal. "Who died?" Whispers asked, his voice low. "Nobody yet," Bumpy said. He was pouring himself a drink, but he wasn't drinking it. He was staring at the amber liquid. "A cop on 125th. Big Irishman, red face, new to the precinct. He assaulted Elise." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Nat and Whispers exchanged a look of shock. In the underworld code, family was off limits. For a street cop to touch Bumpy's daughter was almost suicidal stupidity. "He hurt her?" Nat asked, his hand drifting toward his coat pocket. He manhandled her, Bumpy said, the word tasting like acid in his mouth. Grabbed her, bruised her, humiliated her in front of the neighborhood, kicked her books in the gutter. I'll kill him, Whispers said simply. I'll find him right now. Put 2 in his head. No, Bumpy said sharply. No, Whispers frowned. Bumpy, he touched Elise. You can't let that slide. I didn't say I was going to let it slide. Bumpy turned to face them. But a bullet is too good for him. A bullet is quick. A bullet is mercy. And if we shoot a cop in broad daylight, the entire NYPD comes down on Harlem like a hammer. We lose business. We lose protection. It's messy. Bumpy paced the room. This man, he acted like an animal. He used his badge to terrorize a girl. He thinks he's untouchable because he wears a uniform. He thinks fear belongs to him. Bumpy stopped. A cold, cruel smile touched his lips. I want to return the favor. I don't want to just hurt him. I want to break him. And I want every other cop in that precinct to know exactly why it happened. So what's the play? Nat asked. First, I need a name, Bumpy said. Go to the street. Talk to the vendors on 125th. Someone saw it. Find out who he is, where he drinks, and who his captain is. Nat and Whispers nodded and left. Bumpy sat back down. He looked at the telephone. He decided to make one call first. A courtesy call. He wanted to give the system one chance to correct itself, mostly so he could say he tried. He dialed the number for the 28th precinct. Desk sergeant, a bored voice answered. This is Ellsworth Johnson, Bumpy said. There was a pause. The name carried weight, even inside the station house. What do you want, Johnson? I'm calling to report an assault, Bumpy said calmly. One of your officers assaulted a young woman on 125th Street an hour ago. Grabbed her, bruised her, for no reason. Is that so? The sergeant chuckled. And who was this young woman? One of your girls? My daughter, Bumpy said. The chuckle stopped for a second, then returned, harder this time. Oh, the princess. Maybe she should watch where she's walking, Johnson. Our boys are just doing their job, keeping the streets clean. Maybe you should teach her some manners. I see, Bumpy said. So there will be no disciplinary action? The only action is going to be me hanging up this phone, the sergeant said. Don't call here again, Bumpy, unless you want us to come down there and pay you a visit. The line went dead. Bumpy held the receiver for a moment, listening to the dial tone. He nodded slowly. Okay, he whispered to the empty room. We do it my way. By evening, the intelligence had come back. Nat and Whispers stood in the kitchen, eating sandwiches, while Bumpy outlined the situation on a notepad. His name is Sean McInness, Nat reported. They call him the Bull. He's a transfer from downtown, had a history of breaking jaws in Hell's Kitchen. He's a sadist, Bumpy. Likes to hurt people who can't fight back. Where is he now? Bumpy asked. He's on the night shift rotation, Whispers added. He's at the precinct now. Shift change is in 2 hours. We aren't going to the bar, Bumpy said. We're going to the precinct. The precinct? Nat asked, surprised. You want to hit him inside the station? I want to send a message to the station, Bumpy corrected. I want the captain, the desk sergeant, and every rookie in that building to scream when they see what happens to men who touch my daughter. Bumpy walked to the pantry. He pulled out a large wooden crate. It was an old produce crate, sturdy and deep. Nat, Bumpy said, go to the clothing store on 125th, the one with the display window. I need you to acquire something. I need a male mannequin, the one with the broad shoulders. A mannequin? Nat blinked. And Whispers, Bumpy continued. Go to the butcher shop. I need the leftovers, the offal, intestines, liver, buckets of blood, anything that looks like insides. Bumpy, what are you planning? Bumpy leaned in close. His eyes were shining with a dark, creative malice. McInness likes to use fear. He thinks he's a tough guy. So we are going to show him what he looks like on the inside. We are going to build them a sculpture. We're going to dress it in a uniform. We're going to cover it in blood. And when they open that box, they aren't going to see a doll. For those first few seconds, they are going to think they are looking at the mutilated corpse of Officer McInness. That's twisted, boss, Whispers said, a grin slowly forming. It's art, Bumpy said. Get to work. It took 3 hours to prepare the gift. The atmosphere in the basement of the safe house was grim. Bumpy oversaw the operation like a sculptor working in a medium of nightmare. The mannequin lay on the table. It was a stiff, fiberglass figure with a frozen, pleasant smile. Paint the face, Bumpy ordered. Make it red, like a tomato, just like McInness. Nat applied the ruddy paint. They dressed the figure in a blue NYPD shirt they had sourced from a crooked laundry service. They pinned a badge on the chest, not McInness's real badge, but a replica. Then came the gruesome part. Bumpy wasn't satisfied with a clean dummy. He wanted shock value. He wanted visceral terror. They took the buckets from the butcher shop. They poured the thick, copper-smelling animal blood over the blue shirt, soaking the fabric until it was black-red. They draped the cold, slippery intestines and organ meat over the mannequin's lap and around its neck, making it look as though the officer had been torn open. They positioned the mannequin in the crate, contorting its limbs at unnatural angles so it looked like a body that had been shoved into a box too small for it. The frozen, painted smile of the mannequin, now splattered with red, looked horrifyingly grotesque. Nail it shut, Bumpy said, wiping his hands on a rag, and make sure it leaks just a little. It was 10 p.m. The night shift at the 28th Precinct was in full swing. The station house was busy. Detectives were typing reports, uniforms were drinking coffee, and the desk sergeant, the one who had laughed at Bumpy, was reading a magazine. A delivery truck idled at the curb outside. Nat and Whispers, dressed in workman's coveralls, unloaded the crate. It was heavy, weighted down by the mannequin and the butcher's refuse. Careful, Bumpy said from the shadows of the alley. Drop it hard. Make a noise. Nat and Whispers carried the crate up the steps of the precinct. They kicked the doors open. The lobby of the station went quiet. Cops looked up. Delivery, Nat shouted, his voice echoing off the tile walls. Who's it for? The desk sergeant asked, annoyed. For the captain, Whispers said. Compliments of the neighborhood. They dropped the crate in the middle of the floor. Thud. The impact jarred the lid. A trickle of dark red liquid began to seep out from the bottom corner, pooling on the white tile floor. Hey, the sergeant stood up. You can't leave that there. It's leaking. Not my problem, Nat said. They turned and walked out, disappearing into the night. The cops in the lobby froze. They stared at the box. They stared at the red puddle expanding on the floor. Is that blood? A rookie cop whispered. The smell hit them then. The metallic tang of blood and raw meat filled the warm lobby. Jesus Christ, the sergeant said, his face pale. Captain, get out here. The captain burst out of his office. What is going on? Someone dropped this off. It's bleeding, sir. The room was deadly silent. The tension was suffocating. Every cop was thinking the same thing. One of us is in there. Open it, the captain ordered, his voice trembling. Get the crowbar. 2 officers stepped forward. Their hands shook as they wedged the iron bar under the lid. The wood groaned. Nails screeched. With a final heave, the lid flew off. The officers recoiled, stumbling back, hands flying to their mouths. "Oh God!" someone screamed. "It's McInness! They killed McInness!" From where they stood, looking down into the crate, the illusion was perfect. They saw the blue uniform. They saw the ruddy red face. They saw the badge. And they saw the gore. The blood-soaked shirt, the intestines spilling out. The frozen, smiling face of the mannequin, splattered with red, looked like a death mask. "Medic!" the captain screamed, panic seizing his voice. "Officer down! Call an ambulance!" Pandemonium erupted. Cops were shouting, radios were squawking. The sergeant was dry-heaving in the corner. They were terrified. They were looking at what they thought was their colleague, butchered and boxed like meat. And then, the front door of the precinct opened. Officer Sean, the Bull McInness, walked in, swinging his nightstick, whistling. He was 10 minutes late for his shift. "Evening, boys," McInness boomed. "What's all the noise? Who died?" He stopped. He saw the entire precinct standing around a box. He saw the captain, white as a sheet. He saw the blood on the floor. And then he looked in the box. He saw himself, or rather, a grotesque plastic caricature of himself. He saw the red face, the uniform, the guts. The precinct went silent. The scream of sirens outside seemed to fade away. The cops looked at the box. Then they looked at McInness. Then back at the box. Slowly, the realization dawned on them. It wasn't a body. It was a doll. The terror in the room evaporated, replaced instantly by a wave of humiliation. They had been screaming over a dummy. They had called an ambulance for a mannequin. It's fake," the captain whispered, his face turning from white to a furious purple. "It's a damn doll." McInness walked over to the box. He stared down at the effigy. The mannequin stared back with its painted, bloody smile. There was a note pinned to the mannequin's chest with a knife. McInness pulled it free. His hands were shaking. "Read it," the captain hissed. McInness read the note aloud. His voice cracked. "To the captain. This is what a man looks like without a soul. Plastic. Hollow. Fake. Keep your officers away from my daughter. Next time, I won't send a dummy. Ellsworth Johnson." The room was silent. But it wasn't a respectful silence. It was the silence of men who realized they had been played. Bumpy Johnson hadn't just threatened them. He had made them look like fools. He had exposed their fear. McInness looked around the room. The other officers wouldn't meet his eye. They were embarrassed to be associated with him. He was the reason they were currently standing in a pool of butcher's blood, looking like idiots. "Get that thing out of here," the captain said, his voice cold and quiet. "Clean this mess up." "And McInness?" "Sir?" "My office. Now." Across the street, in the back of the Cadillac, Bumpy Johnson watched the scene unfold. He didn't smile. His face was stone. "Did they scream?" Nat asked. "They screamed," Bumpy said. "Now drive. Part 1 is done." The office of Captain O'Shea was a glass-walled fishbowl overlooking the bullpen of the 28th Precinct. But tonight, the blinds were drawn tight. The air inside was thick with cigarette smoke and the sour metallic smell of impending ruin. Captain O'Shea sat behind his desk, rubbing his temples as if trying to massage away a migraine that had rooted itself deep in his skull. On the desk in front of him lay the note Bumpy Johnson had pinned to the mannequin. Sean McInness stood on the other side of the desk. The red paint from the mannequin incident was gone, scrubbed away by the janitorial staff, but the stain of humiliation remained. McInness was vibrating with a mixture of adrenaline and impotent rage. He could still hear the phantom laughter of the other officers. He could still see the way they looked at him, not with fear, not with respect, but with the pity reserved for a man who has stepped on a rake in front of a crowd. "You're suspending me," McInness said, his voice low and dangerous. "For what? For a prank? Johnson sends a doll into the station, makes us look like idiots, and you're punishing me?" O'Shea slammed his hand on the desk. "I'm punishing you because you're a liability, McInness. Do you have any idea how close we came to a riot tonight? If the press got wind that Bumpy Johnson scared a precinct full of cops with a plastic dummy, we'd be the laughingstock of the entire city. The commissioner would have my badge on his desk by morning." "It's Johnson who needs to be punished," McInness shouted, stepping forward. "He threatened a police officer. That's a felony. Let me go pick him up. I'll drag him in here by his hair." "You won't touch him," O'Shea hissed. "You won't even look at him. You are done, Sean. Hand over your badge and your gun. 2 weeks suspension, unpaid. Go home, cool off, and pray that Johnson decides he's made his point." McInness stared at the captain. The betrayal tasted like bile. He was the law. He was the white line that held back the chaos. And here was his superior, bowing down to a gangster from Harlem because of a cheap theatrical trick. Slowly, McInness reached to his belt. He unclipped his badge. He placed it on the desk with a heavy clink. Then he unholstered his service revolver. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, his thumb brushing the hammer, before placing the heavy steel weapon next to the badge. "You're making a mistake, Captain," McInness said. "You're letting the animals run the zoo." "Get out," O'Shea said, not looking up. McInness turned and walked out of the office. As he passed through the bullpen, the room went quiet. Officers looked down at their typewriters. Detectives pretended to be on the phone. No one wanted to make eye contact with the dead man walking. McInness felt their judgment burning into his back. He pushed through the double doors and out into the night. The cool air didn't cool him down. It only fed the fire. He walked to his car, a battered Ford, and slammed his fist against the roof. The metal dented. 2 weeks, he muttered to himself. He thinks he can bench me for 2 weeks? He reached into the glove compartment. He pushed aside a stack of unpaid parking tickets and a flask of whiskey. His hand closed around the cold steel of a snub-nosed .38 special, his throwdown piece, the unregistered backup gun he kept for emergencies. He wasn't going home. He wasn't going to cool off. He was going to O'Reilly's. And then he was going to finish what he started. O'Reilly's was a cop bar on the edge of Hell's Kitchen, a place where the lights were low, the whiskey was cheap, and the conversations were strictly off the record. It was neutral ground, far away from Harlem. McInness sat at the end of the bar, nursing his 4th double bourbon. The alcohol was doing its work, stripping away the caution and leaving only the raw, throbbing ego. He replayed the scene on 125th Street in his mind. The girl, the fear in her eyes, the power he had felt. It was his right. It was the natural order of things. Who was Bumpy Johnson to tell him otherwise? Who was Bumpy Johnson to make him a joke? "Rough night, Sean?" McInness looked up. Standing next to him was Detective Kowalski, a vice cop who was known for being as crooked as a dog's hind leg. Kowalski was on the take from half the gambling dens in the city, but he had no love for the black gangsters uptown. "You could say that," McInness grunted. "You hear about the circus uptown?" "Word travels," Kowalski said, sliding onto the stool next to him. Mannequin in a box. Cute. Bumpy's got a sense of humor. It ain't funny, McInness snapped. It's a threat. He's laughing at us, Kowalski. He thinks he owns the department. He pays enough of the department that he might as well, Kowalski shrugged. Captain O'Shea is terrified of him. Johnson has files on everyone. McInness downed his drink and slammed the glass on the wood. He don't have files on me. I'm clean. And I'm not scared of a pimp in a suit. Kowalski eyed him carefully. You're suspended, Sean. Go home. Sleep it off. Johnson isn't someone you go to war with alone. I'm not alone, McInness said, his voice slurring slightly. I got the badge right here. He tapped his chest where his heart was, forgetting that the physical shield was sitting on O'Shea's desk. It's in the blood. You think I'm gonna let him win? You think I'm gonna let that girl walk around thinking she's better than me? He stood up, swaying slightly. The room spun, then steadied. Where are you going? Kowalski asked. I'm going to send a message back, McInness said. He likes boxes? I'll give him a box. A pine one. Sean, don't be stupid, Kowalski warned. McInness ignored him. He threw a crumpled bill on the bar and stumbled out the door. The whiskey fueled his courage, drowning out the voice of reason that whispered he was walking into his grave. He got into his Ford. He checked the .38 in his pocket. He pointed the car north, back toward Harlem. It was past midnight when McInness arrived at the jagged intersection of 116th and Lenox. The streets were quieter now, the nightlife settling into the deep, rhythmic pulse of the after-hours spots. McInness didn't go to the Precinct. He didn't go to Lenox Terrace. He went to the Blue Velvet, a jazz club that everyone knew Bumpy Johnson used as a counting house for the numbers racket. He parked the car on the sidewalk, not caring about the tires bumping over the curb. He got out, stumbling slightly. He didn't look like an officer of the law anymore. He looked like a brawler, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, face flushed, eyes wild. The doorman, a giant named Tiny, stepped forward. Club's closed, pal. Private party. McInness didn't speak. He pulled the .38 from his pocket and whipped it across Tiny's face. The heavy steel barrel connected with the doorman's cheekbone with a sickening crack. Tiny went down, clutching his face, blood spurting through his fingers. McInness kicked the door open. Inside, the club was dimly lit. A few musicians were packing up on stage. A waitress was wiping down tables. At the back, near the office, two men in suits were counting cash. They looked up, startled by the intrusion. "Where is he?" McInness roared, waving the gun. "Where's Johnson?" The music stopped. The waitress dropped her rag. The men at the back stood up slowly, their hands moving toward their lapels. "Easy, friend," one of the men said. "You're in the wrong place." "I'm in exactly the right place," McInness shouted. He fired a shot into the ceiling. Bang! Plaster rained down on the polished floor. The waitress screamed and dove under a table. "Tell your boss," McInness screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "Tell him the mannequin didn't work. Tell him he can't scare me with dolls. I'm coming for him. And tell him," he paused, his eyes scanning the room, looking for something to break. He saw a framed photo of Bumpy and his family behind the bar. He marched over, grabbed a bottle of scotch, and smashed it into the mirror, shattering the glass. "Tell him I'm coming for the girl again," McInness bellowed. "And next time, I won't just bruise her arm. I'll break it." He overturned a table, sending glasses crashing to the floor. He was a whirlwind of destruction, a man trying to destroy his own fear by destroying everything around him. "You hear me?" McInness pointed the gun at the men in the back. "Tell him the bull was here." He backed out of the club, kicking the door open. He stepped over the groaning doorman and got back into his car. He peeled away, tires screeching, leaving a trail of smoke and shattered glass in his wake. Inside the club, silence returned. The man in the suit picked up the telephone. He didn't dial the police. He dialed a private number. "It's Nat," the man said when the line connected. "Wake him up." The cop came back, and he threatened Elise again. Bumpy Johnson did not sleep. He lay in the dark, listening to the city. When the phone rang, he picked it up before the second ring. He listened to Nat's report in silence. His face, illuminated by the streetlights filtering through the curtains, was a mask of stone. When Nat finished, Bumpy asked one question. "He threatened Elise?" "Yes, boss. Said he'd break her arm next time. He smashed up the velvet. Hurt Tiny pretty bad." "Okay," Bumpy said. "Bring the car around." "Where are we going?" "To see Chin." 20 minutes later, Bumpy walked into the back room of a bakery on Mulberry Street in Little Italy. It was 2 a.m., but Vincent the Chin Gigante was awake, playing cards with two of his captains. The air smelled of yeast and anise. Chin looked up as Bumpy entered. He saw the look in Bumpy's eyes and put his cards down. He signaled for his men to leave the room. "You look like the devil, Bumpy," Chin said, pouring 2 espressos. "I have a pest problem," Bumpy said, sitting down. "A blue pest." "The cop?" Chin asked. "I heard about the show you put on at the Precinct. Very creative. My nephew is still laughing about it." "It didn't take," Bumpy said. "He came back tonight. He hit the blue velvet, waved a gun, hurt my doorman." Chin frowned. "He's rogue. A suspended cop with a death wish. That's dangerous." "He threatened my daughter again," Bumpy said. His voice dropped an octave, becoming a rumble deep in his chest. "He said he was coming for her." Chin paused. He understood the code. Business was business, but family was sacred. And a threat against a daughter was a declaration of war. "What do you need?" Chin asked. "I'm going to kill him," Bumpy said. "Tonight. But he's still a cop, technically. If a cop turns up dead in Harlem with 2 bullets in his head, the heat will be unbearable for both of us." "So you want him to disappear," Chin said. "I want him erased," Bumpy corrected. "No body, no badge, no investigation. Just a missing person report that sits in a file until it rots." Chin nodded slowly. "The precinct knows he's a loose cannon. O'Shea suspended him. If he vanishes, O'Shea will assume he skipped town or drank himself to death in a ditch. He won't look too hard." "I need a place," Bumpy said. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere permanent." Chin took a sip of espresso. He smiled, a thin, cruel curving of his lips. "We're pouring the foundation for the new housing project in the Bronx tomorrow morning," Chin said. "The cement trucks arrive at 6 a.m. It's a big foundation, Bumpy. Deep. Lots of concrete." Bumpy nodded. "Perfect. How will you get him there?" "He wants me," Bumpy said. "He wants to be a hero. I'll give him a chance to be one." McInness was sitting in his car under the George Washington Bridge, drinking from the flask. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. He had crossed the line. He knew it. He had assaulted a civilian, fired a weapon in a club, and threatened a mob boss. There was no going back to the precinct now. His only way out was to bring Bumpy Johnson down. If he could kill Bumpy, claim it was a shootout, claim self-defense, maybe he could spin it. Maybe he could be the man who took down the king of Harlem. The radio in his car crackled. It wasn't the police band. He had a CB radio he used to listen to the truckers and the snitches. "Breaker 19, a voice scratched through the static. It was a voice McInness recognized, a low-level junkie named Spider, who McInness used for info. "Looking for the bull. You out there, bull?" McInness grabbed the mic. "I'm here. What do you got?" "Big movement tonight," Spider whispered. "Word on the street is Johnson is moving a shipment. Heroin. Big time. He's personally overseeing it because of the heat." "Where?" McInness demanded, his grip tightening on the mic. "The Red Hook Shipyards, Pier 41, Warehouse C, in 1 hour. He's going to be alone with the buyer." "You sure?" "I saw him leave Lenox Terrace myself, just him and a driver." McInness dropped the mic. This was it. This was the miracle. Bumpy Johnson, exposed, committing a federal crime. If McInness busted him, or better yet, if Bumpy resisted and McInness had to put him down, he would be a legend. He would be untouchable. He started the car. The engine roared. He turned the car toward Brooklyn. He didn't know that Spider was currently sitting in the back of Bumpy's Cadillac, holding a stack of $100 bills, with a gun pressed to his ribs by Whispers. "Good job, Spider," Whispers said. "Now get out." The Red Hook shipyards were a graveyard of rust and shadow. The fog rolled in off the harbor, thick and gray, obscuring the cranes that loomed overhead like skeletal dinosaurs. The air tasted of salt and diesel fuel. It was desolate. McInness parked his car a block away. He moved through the shadows, his .38 raised. He felt like a soldier behind enemy lines. He felt powerful. He found Warehouse C. The side door was ajar. A single dim light bulb burned inside, casting long, eerie shadows against the corrugated metal walls. McInness slipped inside. The warehouse was cavernous, filled with stacks of crates and shipping containers. It was silent, save for the dripping of water from a leaky roof. Drip, drip, drip. He moved toward the center of the room, where the light pooled, and there he was. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson sat on a wooden crate in the middle of the empty floor. He was wearing his impeccable suit, his fedora resting on his knee. He was smoking a cigar, the cherry glowing red in the gloom. He looked completely at ease, as if he was sitting in his own living room. There was no heroin. There were no buyers. Just Bumpy. McInness stepped out of the shadows, leveling the gun at Bumpy's chest. "Police!" McInness shouted, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "Don't move, Johnson! Hands where I can see them!" Bumpy didn't flinch. He took a slow drag of his cigar and exhaled a plume of blue smoke. He looked at McInness with an expression of mild disappointment. "You're late, Sean," Bumpy said calmly. "I hate waiting." "Shut up!" McInness advanced, his hands shaking slightly. "Stand up. You're under arrest." "For what?" Bumpy asked. "Sitting in a warehouse? Smoking a cigar?" "For conspiracy, for racketeering," McInness shouted, frantic. "Where's the dope, Johnson? I know it's here." "There is no dope," Bumpy said. "Just you and me." "I'll kill you," McInness threatened, cocking the hammer of the revolver. "I'll drop you right here. Self-defense. You went for a gun." "I don't have a gun," Bumpy said, opening his jacket to show his empty holster. "And you aren't going to shoot me." "You think I won't?" McInness screamed. "You think you're special? You're just a—" He used the word again. The slur hung in the cold air. Bumpy's eyes narrowed. "You have a very limited vocabulary, Sean. It's a sign of a small mind." "I'm the law," McInness yelled. "I'm the one with the gun." "You have a gun," Bumpy agreed. "But you don't have the room." McInness frowned. "What?" Click. The sound came from everywhere at once. High above on the catwalks, from behind the stacks of crates, from the shadows near the door. McInness spun around. Emerging from the darkness were a dozen men. Nat Pettigrew, Whispers, and men McInness didn't recognize. Hard-looking Italians in trench coats holding Thompson submachine guns. McInness froze. He realized, with a sickening jolt, that he hadn't walked into a bust. He had walked into a tomb. "Drop it," Nat said, stepping into the light. He held a shotgun leveled at McInness's stomach. McInness looked at his .38. Then he looked at the ring of steel surrounding him. "I'm a cop," McInness whispered, his voice trembling. "You can't kill a cop." "You're not a cop tonight," Bumpy said, standing up slowly. He brushed ash from his trousers. "You're suspended. You're drunk. You're trespassing. And nobody knows you're here." Bumpy walked toward him. He walked right up to the barrel of the gun. "Go ahead," Bumpy said softly. "Pull the trigger. You might get me. But my friends here, they will turn you into red mist before my body hits the floor. Is that how you want to go out? In a blaze of glory?" McInness looked into Bumpy's eyes. He saw no fear. He saw only an abyss. The courage the whiskey had given him evaporated. The gun felt heavy in his hand. His arm began to shake uncontrollably. He lowered the gun. Nat stepped forward and snatched the weapon from his hand. He pistol-whipped McInness across the face. Crack. McInness crumpled to the concrete, blood pouring from his nose. He curled into a ball, whimpering. "Get up," Bumpy said. McInness tried to crawl away. Please, Mr. Johnson, I'm sorry. I was drunk. I didn't mean it." "You didn't mean to break my doorman's face?" Bumpy asked, circling him. "You didn't mean to bruise my daughter's arm? You didn't mean to call her an animal?" "I'll leave town," McInness begged, tears mixing with the blood on his face. "I'll go back to Hell's Kitchen. I'll go to Jersey. You'll never see me again." "You're right," Bumpy said. "I won't." Bumpy nodded to the Italians. "He's all yours." Two of the men grabbed McInness by the arms and dragged him toward the back of the warehouse where a black van was waiting. McInness screamed, digging his heels into the concrete, but he was powerless against them. "Where are you taking me?" he shrieked. No, I have rights. I'm a citizen." Bumpy walked over to him. He leaned down close to McInness's ear. "You wanted to be a big man, Sean," Bumpy whispered. "You wanted to stand firm. Well, my friends are building a new housing project in the Bronx. They need a strong foundation. You're going to be a pillar of the community. Literally." McInness's eyes widened in horror. He understood. The cement, the deep hole, the darkness. "No," McInness wailed. "Please, God, no!" They threw him into the back of the van. The doors slammed shut, cutting off his screams. The van engine roared to life. It drove out of the warehouse, disappearing into the fog. Bumpy stood alone in the center of the warehouse. Nat walked over to him. "You okay, boss?" "I'm fine," Bumpy said. He looked at the cigar in his hand. It had gone out. He dropped it on the floor and crushed it under his polished shoe. "What about the car?" Nat asked. "His Ford is parked down the block." "Have the boys strip it," Bumpy said. "Take the plates. Dump it in the river in Jersey. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Or just disappear it." "And the captain?" "O'Shea won't ask questions," Bumpy said. "He'll be relieved. The headache is gone." The sun rose over Harlem the next morning, burning off the fog. The city woke up, vibrant and loud. Children played in the spray of fire hydrants. Vendors sold shaved ice. The rhythm of the street continued, unbroken. At the 28th Precinct, Captain O'Shea sat at his desk. A courier had just delivered a small package wrapped in brown paper. There was no return address. O'Shea opened it. Inside was a police badge. Number 492. Sean McInness's badge. And wrapped around it was a single, pristine, white ribbon. O'Shea stared at the badge for a long time. He felt a chill run down his spine despite the heat of the morning. He opened his desk drawer. He dropped the badge inside, deep in the back, behind the files of unsolved cases. He closed the drawer. He picked up the phone. "Sergeant," he said, "mark Officer McInness as AWOL. If he doesn't show up in 48 hours, process his termination papers." "Yes, sir." "Any idea where he went?" "No," O'Shea said, looking out the window at the skyline of the Bronx in the distance, where the cranes were already moving, pouring concrete for the new high-rises. "Probably went west, looking for a fresh start." At Lenox Terrace, Elise was getting ready for school. She came into the kitchen, her arm still bandaged, but her spirit healing. Bumpy was sitting at the table, drinking coffee. He looked up as she entered. The darkness was gone from his eyes, replaced by the warm, protective gaze of a father. "How's the arm?" he asked. "It hurts a little," she said, "but I think the swelling is going down." "Good," Bumpy said. "Are you going to class today?" "I have an exam," she said. She looked at him. Is it safe to go out?" Bumpy stood up. He walked over to her and kissed her on the forehead. "The streets are safe, sweetheart," Bumpy said. "The animal control came by last night. The problem has been handled." Elise looked at him. She saw the truth in his eyes. She didn't ask for details. She didn't want to know. She just nodded. She grabbed her books, new ones, to replace the ones that had been ruined, and walked to the door. "I'll see you tonight, Daddy." "Study hard," Bumpy called after her. He walked to the window. He watched his daughter walk out of the building. She stepped onto the sidewalk. She paused at the curb. The sun was shining on her. A police cruiser rolled slowly down the street. It was Hopkins, the rookie. He saw Elise. He slowed down. Bumpy tensed, his hand resting on the windowsill. Hopkins looked at Elise. Then he looked up at the window of the apartment, knowing Bumpy was watching. The officer tipped his cap respectfully to Elise. He stopped his car to let her cross the street. Elise smiled, waved, and crossed safely. Bumpy watched her disappear around the corner. He let out a long breath. He turned back to the room where the chessboard sat waiting. He moved a pawn forward. The game continued. But for now, the king was safe. Thanks for listening, folks. If you liked that video and want more, be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss any Bumpy Johnson stories.